Hi everyone, welcome back to Write Better Together with Peggy and Kennedy. And joining me today is an extra special guest, one of my favorite professors at the University of Tulsa, Dr. Boris Drayluk. He is an associate professor of English, right? Sorry.
That's right.
And he is also a poet and translator and a critic. He has written a book of poetry, My Hollywood and Other Poems. He's translated Tolstoy, Kirchhoff, and other writers. His poems have appeared in the New York Review of Books, Hudson Review, and others. And he is a recipient of the 2024 Literature Award from the, uh, I can't read my own handwriting, but the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and also Greg Barrios Book and Translation Prize from the National Books Critics Circle. So you've been busy, you've done a lot. So
I would say so. Yeah, yeah.
so would you be willing to tell us a little bit about your poems? I remember you mentioned in class some that you actually grew up in and around Hollywood. So I
That's
imagine
right.
that. Oh, good.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me, Peggyann. It's a pleasure to talk to you always under any circumstances, but especially here now, and to share whatever wisdom I may have with your audience. There isn't much. Don't expect too much wisdom. I did grow up in Hollywood. I wasn't born in Hollywood. I was born in Odessa in Ukraine, in the 1980s when it was still part of the Soviet Union, and emigrated to Hollywood in '91 as a kid. So I grew up in Hollywood, but I like most people who live in that town, I'm an immigrant, either from within the United States or from without. I grew up in an enclave of Russian-speaking emigres and Ukrainian-speaking emigres from the former Soviet Union, and the poems in my book are inspired in part by Hollywood's history, but also in part by my own experiences of that immigrant community, watching it change over time, feeling both at home and not entirely at home, the effort to make a new home in this new country. All of that went into the recipe for those poems.
Oh, that is really incredible. I remember you mentioning in one of the classes that you were actually one of the children that passed out maps or something for the Hollywood homes to tourists.
It's
Oh,
true. Yeah, I was for very briefly. It was not exactly a career, but it was a gig. I When I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, was scooped up by this gentleman. Maybe gentleman is too soft a word for him. Who recruited youngsters around town to sell maps to the stars' homes on street corners. And so I spent a grueling a Saturday trying to convince passersby to buy these maps. I didn't succeed very well, and I wasn't paid very well, and I didn't return to the job the next week. But the memory of that experience stays with me, and that was probably as close as I came to stardom, is selling the maps to the homes of the stars.
that's a really fascinating story. I know that has influenced you a lot, but
It has, it gave me a kind of street level perspective on life in Hollywood. Reminded me of where I stood in the grand constellation of the stars.
what are some other influences of your poetry?
Well, I tend to write in fixed forms. That is, I use meter and rhyme, and I think partly that does owe to the fact that I grew up speaking and reading two languages in which metrical poetry continued to dominate well into the 21st century. In Russian and Ukrainian literature, most poetry written until about 1990, 1995, maybe even 2000, rhymed and conformed to one metrical scheme or another. And so I grew up loving metrical verse and kind of responding to it very, very naturally. Uh, and I would say that that probably was true for most readers of English poetry until English language poetry until the 1950s, 1960s, maybe even the 1970s, probably 1950s, 1960s, and so my development, maybe you can say, was a little bit delayed. I'm kind of old fashioned because of the cultures out of which I arrived from out of which I sprang, and so I continue to be drawn to metrical poetry, be drawn to rhyme, and I'm not alone in this. There are a lot of poets working today who are as comfortable in metrical and rhymed verse as they are in free verse. So I think that there's a bit of a resurgence of interest in these what were once regarded as old fashioned techniques. I think now they're being revived, and I'm a small part of that process.
Awesome. I really like that. I really struggle with the rhyme and meter and fixed
You
forms
did
of
really well
poetry.
in my classes, so you may
Good.
struggle with it, but struggle is how you succeed. There's no gain without pain, as you know from your military career as well.
That is
Or
very
Navy
true.
career.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, sir. But what first actually drew you to poetry?
Well, it's interesting. I think I would say that probably I was drawn to it at an early age, um, when well, there is one anecdote I can share with you. When I was maybe 5 years old, maybe six, I think probably five, before I started school, uh, I attended a kind of kindergarten presentation at the local library in Odessa. And the library was just a block away from where I lived, so I spent a lot of time there in any case. And my mother was a librarian, so I grew up around books. And sitting in one of these small plastic chairs with a lot of other 5-year-olds, I was listening to this presentation, and I don't remember a single word that was said during this hour-long boring meeting. But I do remember that behind the speaker was a mural of a man with his arm outstretched, looking up in the direction to which he was pointing, and reciting something. His mouth was open, and he was speaking, and he wore a striped sailor's shirt, a Breton kind of shirt, and I remember being drawn to this image and thinking, whatever that man is doing, I want to be doing that. And it turned out that was the Soviet poet Vladimir Mayakovsky. And my mother explained to me that what he was doing was reciting his poems. And so I think that first initial encounter with the heroic image of the poet, speaking his verses into the universe, sending his words out into the universe, probably had a deep impact on me and made me think of poets as being, something other than just shy, retiring people who sit at home and scribble on pieces of paper, but as people who can move mountains with their voices. And that was probably my first image of the poet. And then when I came to the United States, I for a long time neglected Russian because I wanted very much to fit in this English speaking environment and to pick up the language as quickly as possible. And only at the age of 13 or so, about 4 years after emigrating, 4 or 5 years, did I realize that I had missed an opportunity to develop my Russian and my Ukrainian, and that I should have been working on these languages instead of neglecting them so badly. So I asked my mother for some advice on how I could recoup what I had lost and make up for lost time. And she said that I should start reading poetry rather than prose. And her rationale was that because Russian and Ukrainian poetry rhymed, and because it conformed to meter, it would be easier for me to pronounce the words that I encountered on the page, which otherwise I would not be able to know how to speak because of those devices. I would know exactly where the accent on a word fell because it had to fall on a certain place in order for that word to sit in the rhyme scheme, or sit in the metrical scheme. And so reading poetry would allow me not only to learn new words, but also to learn what they sounded like. Uh, and that was really good advice. And so as soon as I started reading those poems, I began wanting to translate them into English. I fell so deeply in love with what I was reading, I wanted to recreate it in the language in which I felt most comfortable, which by that point was English.
I love that. Do you have a favorite Russian poem?
A favorite Russian poem? Well, um, I can't choose. It's like choosing between your kids, and I have twins, so impossible. But I would say that among my favorite Russian language poets, the poet from whom I try to learn is an emigre poet who lived most of his life in France and died in relative poverty, whose name was Georgy Ivanov. And he wrote these exquisite short lyrics, a lot of them quite nihilistic in terms of their attitude to life, but also aesthetically divine, just gloriously beautiful. And indeed, I think, he felt that life's saving grace was the dose of beauty that every day provided. The fact that one can still find small pleasures day to day, even if in the grand scheme of things everything looks dreadful and feels dreadful. And so that poet, I think, partly because of his technique and partly because of his attitude towards life, has been very, very influential for me.
That's really awesome. Well, I know that there are a lot of challenges in the world of translation, and I know about this much about it. But what's it like working with an author, maybe trying to translate someone's works? Is that difficult?
Well, it depends. Every person is different. Every author has her own relationship to her work, and I've worked with authors who are extremely attentive to every detail of the translation, who feel that they speak English uh, almost well enough to translate their own work and want to have a great deal of control over my translations. And I've worked with other authors whose English is no worse and perhaps even better, who trust me completely and let me do whatever it is that I feel is right, because they recognize that my art is not entirely their art, that the translation is a standalone work of creative effort, and uh, so I would say that I've had relationships with authors of both kinds and everything in between, and I don't really have um, a preferred approach. I'm very happy to work with those who want to get their hands dirty and collaborate with me, and I'm also very happy to work with those who let me do whatever it is that I feel is right. Of course, it's easier to work with the second kind, but then again, working with the first kind gives me a sense of security, knowing that I've represented them in the end, as they would like to be represented. So it's it's really just it's up to the author. It's not really up to me.
Right.
I've also translated the dead a lot. I tend to translate people who are no longer around, to hover over my shoulder. And in a way, they do continue to hover over my shoulder. It's just that instead of the actual living being, the person hovering over my shoulder is my own concept of who they are and what they want. So I still feel a deep sense of responsibility to these ghosts, but I have to conjure them myself. I can't say, I can't just reach out to them over the phone.
Right. You want to get the point across as best you can, but a lot of things do kind of get lost in translation, like from one language to another. But what do you
My
do when
feeling
that
is that
happens?
that's true. That's true. I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean to step
You're
over you,
good.
but obviously I'm very passionate about the subject. It's true that a lot of things get lost in translation, but also a lot of things get found in translation. My goal is not to preserve every single nuance of the original. My goal is to create a standalone English language text that is as nuanced as the original, which means that the nuances may be elsewhere. The If you lose a joke in one sentence, you can create a new joke in another. So maybe individual items get lost, but the sum total is the same. You still have the same number of puns. You still have the same number of tricks of language in the translation. They're just not in the same places.
That's really fascinating. It's way over my head. But
I doubt that. If you look at concrete examples, it's always easier to see what we talk about theoretically. We don't have time right now to go over concrete examples, but it wouldn't be over your head if you looked at a piece of paper and I pointed
okay.
it out to you.
I do remember you substituted for Dr. Croft in a writing class once during my undergrad years, and you did talk a lot about translation, and you showed us different translations of the same piece, and they were all so different. They had
Yeah.
different ideas, but kind of ultimately the same basic thing. It's kind of mind-boggling how that can happen.
Well, that's right. Yeah, yeah. The words are different. They're arranged differently, and yet somehow the core of the meaning and also the emotion come through.
Language is a really incredible thing.
It is. It really is.
But back to the subject of poetry, how would you describe the process of writing poetry to somebody who's maybe never done it before?
Oh, it's such a hard question to
Sorry.
answer. No, no, no. It's good. I mean, look. Again, no pain, no gain. I would say that the process of writing poetry is ultimately, for me at least, the process of discovery. And so I would say that you're doing it right when you're learning something about how you feel as you're writing. If you set out to say something and you say exactly what it is that you intended to say and nothing more, then you may have written a decent poem. I don't doubt it. Perhaps even a great poem, but you will not have gained from poetry what it has to offer, in my view, which is this process of enriching your own attitude toward something that you thought you knew or thought you understood or wanted to understand and didn't quite. And that change, that sense of working with material, in this case language, and feeling its resistance and feeling it push and prod and alter your thinking as you're putting these words together, and feeling maybe even a kind of therapeutic effect, being able to deal with emotions or process them, to use a kind of a pop psych term, uh, alter them, maybe enrich them as you're shaping words. That's what poetry can offer the poet. The sense of growing as you work. So that would be my description of the ideal poetic experience of learning something as you massage the language.
Awesome. How do you go about writing poems? Like, do you just sit down and immediately write it all out, or do you have to do a lot of planning or a little bit of both?
It's a really good question
Just
too. I would say that everyone has a different process. Everyone has a different approach. Different is drawn to a different technique. And in my case, what usually happens is that there is some kind of inciting incident, some occasion that sparks um, the creative uh, um, the creative juices, and um, that occasion then inspires me to uh, start thinking about a phrase. And once I land on a single phrase, once I land on perhaps even a full line of poetry in my mind, after maybe days of batting things around in my spare moments, and um, when I have that phrase and it sounds right, that's when I sit down and put it down on paper. And once that phrase is down on paper, I usually uh, try to figure out what the structure of that phrase is, the structure of that line, what the metrical components are, and build according to that structure, the second line, the third line, the fourth line, continuing with the thought, but also adhere to some kind of scheme. Uh, and in that process, I get the ball rolling, and then it takes, anywhere between a day to a week, to a month to get the poem to a decent draft.
Awesome.
Sometimes it comes all at once. After a few hours of work, you have your draft, and sometimes it takes several return visits.
Definitely, for sure. I feel like whenever I'm like drafting a poem and revising it, I could revise it for eternity.
Oh
It
yes,
it just never ends.
yes. The great French poet Paul Valéry said that a poem is never finished; it is only abandoned, and I
Ooh,
completely agree with him. That
definitely.
doesn't mean that you shouldn't abandon them. You really should. At some point, you have to quit, and say that's enough. There is such a thing as too much revision, but most people don't revise enough, rather than revise too much.
Definitely. So I have a few little get to know you questions if you're game.
Sure.
So first of all, if you could have the perfect sandwich, what would be on it?
Ah, very good question. I'm a vegetarian, so that excludes all meat products. But the perfect sandwich for me would probably include. My mouth is watering. I'm pretty hungry right now as I'm answering this. But it would be largely cheese based, and it would probably include at least two kinds of cheese. And it has to be spicy, so probably something like habanero jack. And with that, tomatoes. I love a good tomato, and probably uh, for the crispiness of it, a good lettuce, and a very very spicy mustard, maybe even a kind
Mm.
of a horseradish mustard.
Oh, nice.
That would be my sandwich.
That sounds good. I sadly, unfortunately, have a chronic illness called gastroparesis.
Oh no,
So basically, my stomach just can't digest a lot of things like vegetables, lettuce, tomato,
I'm so sorry,
nuts, even.
Peggyann.
It's okay. There are a lot of things I still can't eat. I can eat a little bit of almost anything, but I
Yeah,
think I would find it very hard to be a vegetarian even if I wanted to be
I
one.
understand.
So,
Well, look, your health comes first. Ethical choice
exactly.
is second. Yeah,
But I can eat vegetables if I cook them to death, though, so there's
that's right.
that.
Yeah, they're mush.
Exactly. So, what's a character from a book, movie, or show that you're most like and why?
That I most like, that I most resemble, whom I
Yes,
most
sir.
resemble. Let's see. Hmm. I don't know. I don't think of myself as resembling any. Well, okay, Mr. Magoo, probably, because my vision is dreadful, and I have a really hard time wearing glasses because they give me a headache. An astigmatism, so my eyes are,
Oh,
kind of crossed,
same.
and and so uh, and so I probably have more trouble, getting around than most people without bumping into things. So Mr. Magoo is probably the character I resemble most. But in terms of uh, my internal character rather than my physical uh, abilities, I would say, hmm. Well, uh, huh. It's a really good question. I don't want to flatter myself, so that excludes all of these great detectives whose adventures I like to read. I wouldn't be a very good detective. Wouldn't be very brave under pressure. Uh,
I think you'd make a
but
good
also,
detective. You're
well,
good
maybe
at
I
puzzles, I
could figure a
think.
few things out, but I could puzzle things out. That's true. But I'd probably be riding the desk, as they say, in the police departments, rather than out in the streets, in the mean streets. Um, there is, you know, let's see. There is a character in um, the narrator of The Moviegoer, a novel called The Moviegoer by Walker Percy, uh, is has a rich internal life, and is a little bit off. Uh, and I think that when I first read The Moviegoer, some many years ago, I did identify with the character. His name was Binks Bowling, and I felt a kinship with that fella.
I get that. That sounds cool. So if you could be the best at anything in the world, what would it be besides like writing or translating or teaching stuff
I'm
you already
almost
do?
too I'm scared of wanting to be the best, you know, uh, at those things. I don't particularly want to be the best translator in the world, and I don't particularly want to be the best poet in the world. Too much pressure. Um, if I could be the best at anything, probably parenting. I'd like to be the best parent in the world. Not gonna happen.
I bet you're better than you think. I think you're a really great dad.
Well, you'll have to ask my kids.
I
Thank you.
bet they really appreciate you. So, what's your favorite song?
My favorite song. Oh, that's a really great question. Well, I think probably my favorite song is uh, um, a song titled "I Can't Get Started," which has lyrics by Ira Gershwin and music by Vernon Duke. And Vernon Duke, this composer, uh, who had a very American name, Vernon Duke, was actually not American. He was a Russian American or Ukrainian American or Belarusian American, hard to say. He was born in the former Russian Empire and grew up in Kiev, in the capital of Ukraine, and escaped Russia as it was falling apart during the Civil War when he was a teen, and he ended up in New York in the 1920s and befriended all of these great songwriters, Broadway songwriters, and composers, including the Gershwin brothers, and began composing popular songs. He was a classical composer, but he composed popular songs, and even writing lyrics for these songs in English, which was his third or fourth language. Uh, and He is one of my personal heroes. He wrote also in late in life, living in California, a number of beautiful poems about Los Angeles, which I've translated. And Those poems have now been published in my translation, along with his autobiography called Passport to Paris, by Paul Dry Books. So that book came out just last year, and it's just an utter thrill for me to have been involved with the republication of this memoir, because it's to my mind one of the best things that you could read if you want to know anything about popular music in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. He himself, probably wasn't as proud of his popular songs as he should have been. I Can't Get Started, to my mind, is one of the essential American songs, and I love it to death. So I'll rank it number one.
I'll have to check it out. He sounds like a really brave man too, very
He
courageous and
was
very
he was
brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely fearless, resilient, and very lighthearted.
Oh, that's awesome. Maybe he's the person that you're most like
Yeah,
in
I would
reality.
hope so. He's the person that certainly I would like to be. I would like to have that kind of attitude.
I like that. So, what kind of atmosphere do you need when you're writing? Like, do you need it dark or quiet or a lot of people, I don't know, at a Starbucks?
I prefer some quiet, but having kids has changed my needs radically. There are only so many quiet corners you can sneak into, and you really can't plan very well on when you'll have time to write. So nowadays, I feel like I can write standing on my head in the middle of a circus.
Oh my word. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I mean, I can do it.
You have to do what you have to do, I guess.
Exactly. Exactly.
But so finally, do you have a call to action or a challenge to our viewers?
Well, I would say, because of the topics that we've discussed today, try your hand at writing something that rhymes and that maybe has a metrical scheme too. Has a meter. Try writing a sonnet in iambic pentameter. See how far you get.
Awesome. I'll have to give that a shot. I haven't written poetry in a while, so
Well,
maybe
yeah,
I'll play
get
around
back
with that
to it.
this weekend.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you very much for being on here, Professor. I really appreciate you and all your help and everything. I
And
really
Peggy Ann, I really appreciate you and your enthusiasm and everything that you've brought to the courses that we've had together.
thank you. Thank you. You've been an incredible teacher. And thank you very much for listening, everyone. Please like and subscribe and check out Dr. Drayluk's poems and everything that he's working on now. And
Thank you.
please don't miss our next episode of Fun Friday. So thank you. Have a good week.
Bye bye.